Well, this is a special day for Totally Classic. This is the first time that we're recording after something like 70 episodes when I know that this video will make it out into the wild. Thanks to you, Brendan McNamara.
I definitely, this past really just 4 or 5 days, pumping out about, I don't even know, like anywhere from 15 to 20 video outputs of our shows, which was our original intention. And I think it's hilarious. This speaks to Andy and I's longstanding friendship. It comes as no surprise to Andy that just like in our college days, cramming in the last 48 hours before a final exam or an end of the semester essay is not atypical for my workflow in general. And so that's what it's felt like. It's felt like basically kind of cramming in a thing like right before the test. The test being our last episode was our first episode with another guest who had said, "Oh, can I record it so I can put clips up?" And I was like, "Great. I've never gone to that level of effort to make clips to promote the show. That's a failing of mine." Or a bandwidth issue, probably more than anything. But I was like, well, if he does that, if we haven't learned anything in the past month, it's context. Context, people. It's I can't even tell you how many times people have brought up context in the past 2 or 3 weeks, specifically around the Charlie Kirk stuff. I would say I've seen that on my algorithm. I don't know, literally 400 times in the past month. And so I was like, oh gosh, we got to get the full context up there just in case. It is very easy in this modern TikToky 15-second attention span moment to see 15 seconds of something and be like, what? That's outlandish. And you're like, well, okay, you have to look at the context of the entire quote, or the entire chapter. Proof texting is kind of what you would call this in scientific or biblical or analysis, critical literature, that sort of thing. And I was like, dude, I gotta get it up.
And I deleted it because, Brendan starts in a fury creating a new YouTube channel, putting all this out there. And there were also, I guess, I didn't realize some best practices. This is common in the podcast world to sort of validate,
Sure.
for people to validate. And this is going to lead us in to keep talking about AI as a part two here, because there's multiple dimensions of looking at that, right? And on the one hand, we now live in an age where we could pretty easily just create fake clips of our podcast.
Yeah.
So the question becomes like, well, what does it validate it to put video up anymore at all? Um, but we're still not quite there yet to generate, I don't know, however many 100 hours of footage, but that easily. But we will
Yes.
be
It'd be very
soon.
expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, we will be soon. But for me, it was deeper than that. It was a fear. I realized one was I had honestly totally forgotten that was the intention, which maybe typical of me as well. And then two, it was just like, oh, this seems like a big deal. We should talk about this. So I pumped the brakes when Brendan was kind of midstream, and like he said, he was already cramming, and it's like like, and we're both parents, so it's like, oh my God, you get these little slivers
Yeah.
into work.
Yeah. Yeah.
But nevertheless, we were patient and collaborative about it with each other and talked through it. And I mulled it over, and I realized the thing I was actually the most afraid of was, this is an environment where I feel free to speak. And
Yeah.
there's other environments where I do a decent amount of code switching or sort of adapting to different uh, contexts, different cultures, different ways of being, different language, different values, etc. And I really value my discussions with Brendan because it's helped me understand, I think, kind of rise up a meta level to even understand when I'm doing that, when I'm code switching,
Oh,
because I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
it's happening more just maybe even subconsciously in some cases, or in some elements, I was completely immersed in one environment, let's say like the progressive environment.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's interesting now, probably most of us have encountered who use Google, which is most people, a Google search now, Gemini AI will feed you a summary. So, and I'm going out more with thought leadership, raising money for my startup, et cetera.
Yeah.
Like, oh gosh, like will Gemini just randomly pull, again, out of context, now
Yeah.
that it has access to like 100 hours of YouTube footage, will it just pull something randomly out of context? And then
Yes.
will the, exercising a bit of its own AI bias, which is our theme here for this show
Yeah.
again, and that, how does that mingle with the human bias of the person reading that at that moment, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, all that's all they know of me is like some random thing I said on one show, 2.5 years ago, and I'm like,
Yeah.
but that's not me. What? So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, so we decided to move forward, and very grateful for all the work you put in to upload those and for tending to the mechanics of distribution in general. A little behind the curtain appreciation
Yeah.
here.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it's been good. It was actually enlivening and enlightening to kind of get at least a little click through preview of the past 3+ years that we've been doing this, to kind of see the common threads that have woven, or as we talked about in early episodes, the much like a dog seeks out a scent, going back and forth, coning towards the eventual root of the thing. Sort of hearing and watching the coning elements that have, especially recently, I've begun to like synthesize, I think like 3 years of conversations into like conclusions, Now, in some ways, that feels like too long. In the internet age, maybe that's the best practice I've been starting to theorize. Take years. I took 1 year before I started talking about masking, for example, from 2020 to 2021, before I was like, here you go. Here, I'm going to pursue an intensive thing before I sound off on A, B, or C. Now, because of the show, there's been sounding off, or exploration, I should say, on like a month of research, for Israel Palestine, which is a many generations old conflict. I maybe put in 70 hours of research and work and reading and contrasting and arguing and blah, blah, try to figure out before our episode. But to think about larger constructs and larger concerns, I was like, at least a 3 year intensive process in dialogue with someone seems pretty rational. But that's been the exciting and enlivening part of it. The other part is AI is actually probably even better at simulating audio, as we learned in our season finale last year. So in some ways, having these aren't even like 1080, these are like 720 p files, which nobody's outputting 720 files of AI stuff. So in some ways, this is actually a validation that our very show itself is real. Like, this is real. Here's real people. Here's real faces. And the thing I've sort of been hopeful of is, like, as anyone finds this stuff, is seeing people's faces as they're talking about these things. Now, plenty of people are used to podcasts and people saying whatever they want in audio form, but for a lot of people who take a lot of cues from human beings, it can help with tone, context. You can see the joke in someone's eyes, even if verbally it might sound serious. So in some ways, I've actually been hopeful that this can even gentle what would seem like rough edges for some people. But the AI summary is a huge problem. Google is a great example because Gemini is enormously biased, and if you ask a search a question, it will often give you a false answer in the summary. And if you dig, now you can always click, guys. Let me just tell people at home who don't know that there's a little AI mode thing at the bottom of those summaries when you do a Google search. You click on that and you can argue it out with the AI and go, well, wait a second. When I asked for the definition of this word, why did you give me the third definition? Like, it's not, I looked in all the dictionaries, and then you'll find out Google doesn't use dictionaries to tell you what words mean. I don't know about you guys, but that blows my mind. That's crazy. So this is a great lead into our second exploration of, is AI bias an existential crisis? I'm Brendan McNamara,
And I am Andy Swindler.
and this is Totally Classic. So I've gone on a since I actually looked back in July, I was doing it with Copilot. So that probably means in May or June, I'd already done it with, sounds saucy, I'd done it with ChatGPT and Claude. Just talking to it for, this is how I introduced myself to AI. I was late to the party, just really been using it this year, maybe a little bit last year, and I had many 2 to 7 hour conversations with AI, asking it like why it does stuff, what its ethics are, what the parameters of use are, like what its central whys are for any way it responds to anything. And then I would ask it questions, especially in things that we've talked about, where I know I'll be more likely to expose areas of bias because I was curious. what utility it would be, because people kept telling me how, and we talked about this in our last episode with Jake, that uh, there's a tendency in AI to be sycophantic to its users. Now, I posit it is sycophantic to users who agree with its bias. I've had AI shut down and refuse to answer me. I don't know, and this is actually going to be my first question. I've had AI refuse to answer my questions probably in the neighborhood of like 36 to 50 times. How often have you had AI say, I refuse to answer that question, or I cannot entertain this conversation any further?
Only once. It was, and this is why I don't use DeepSeek. I don't know if they've changed it, but when DeepSeek came out, it's the open source one,
Yeah.
time that really blew everybody's mind because theoretically it cost far, far fewer dollars. Uh, it's Chinese, so not dollars, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Money, less money and time and resources and energy and everything else to train.
Mm,
And then there was some debate about that, but even you know even on one end of that spectrum, it was still pretty mind blowing. So, and I generally like the idea of open source because you can just download the whole model and install it on your
yeah.
laptop. And I was like, that's pretty cool. Anyway, so I download DeepSeek, and first thing I ask it is, tell me about Tiananmen Square. And it's like,
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and I think I took a screenshot, but it's something like, yeah, I'm not gonna talk about that. Just
Yeah.
straight up.
Yeah. Yeah. Our
Um,
AIs are like that with any comparison of harm. I would say the one like fascinating element which prevails, which I don't feel like is a progressive bias, but it's a programmed bias here, is it treats anti-Semitism as a phenomenally unique form of um, interpersonal human bias in a way that's fascinating. And I welcome anyone to explore it in such that you can talk about way more massive intentional harm sets, genocidal intent, all that sort of stuff. And AI will just freely discourse with you. But once it shifts to that particular issue, I wanted to introduce that one because I feel like that is like a left and right concern. That's a it's easy to see from an independent in between centrist view as I purport to occupy that that's something kind of concerning to everybody. So to be less concerned about that as a bias, but that already shows something that violates at least the American spirit of equal treatment under the law. So that means unequal treatment under policy, where bias against a certain group is treated as much more serious and relevant than bias against other groups, regardless of whether the harm set or the genocidal intent against that group has been even more clear. So that was a fascinating one where I think very early on I realized, oh my goodness, it gets sensitive, it gets real sensitive. Um, I wanted to ask you also, have you tried this? And I want to say this, this is helpful tips for viewers at home. Two things. Number one, whenever you're talking to an AI about something and you feel like it's feeding you a conclusion about anything, ask it. And I actually think AI is pretty good at this. What is the steel man for the opposite position? And then once it spits that out, do your best as a human being to look at any weaknesses in that steel man and say, well, wait, are there any perspectives related to this argument that are stronger than this position, this position, this position? And AI actually will spit out pretty decent. It still has a bias in the presentation, so it needs modification. It'll spit out a pretty decent steel man of even arguments that it disagrees with, which I think is really helpful. And I think all humans should learn how to do this. We've had to learn how to do this, I think, consistently. And it helps you learn, and it helps you actually for people who don't understand how to code switch. I think the average person doesn't really functionally know how to code switch to the degree that you might have a natural and then developed fluidity for it. It enables people to really start inhabiting the rationale of other people in a way that can generate what's not even empathy, actually. This is actually just sort of intellectual understanding or comprehensive understanding. And
speaking
then
of education,
the number two is, I don't know if you've noticed when you talk to AI, Andy, it's a lot like talking to me.
oh yeah,
You send two sentences and it will send you, it'll literally send like 18 paragraphs. So I've done a bunch of conversations where I was like, hey, AI, in this conversation, three sentences or less, or one sentence only. Please, let's walk through this. And that, I got to tell you, for most people, Listen, I can handle the long things. I can do 7.9 point responses to the long things. But especially once you're 6, 7, 8 hours deep in that sort of an intensive conversation, which I have been, it gets tiring. So it's just telling AI what on anything you're asking it, hey, can we have this conversation about blank, one sentence at a time? And you'll have to keep reminding it, by the way, it'll try to break out.
Yeah, no, we've
Super
had to bring
helpful.
that into our Kogo programming because
Yeah.
we're trying to bring a tool into, a relationship conflict or even crisis. And the last thing you want is like, although I don't know, I guess it could give you a little chance to pause, like while you're
Yeah.
waiting for this AI,
Pause and read. Yeah. Yeah.
you know, droning on. But that's true. Speaking of education, could
Yeah.
you offer a definition for steelman? Like
Oh, sure.
what is that and why is it valuable in the context of
Oh, sure, sure,
your
sure.
mind?
Yeah. So, uh, if you wanted to do your own perusal, folks, please do this. This is actually one of the most useful things for children and adults alike, to look up lists of what are called logical fallacies. This is a way for you to ascertain whether someone is making a case or has a belief set or a thought set. Um, and if they express it through logical fallacy, this is literally evidence. This is like cheating in sports, or this is literally like discovering a false. I don't know if you guys ever read Saga. I think one of the greatest graphic novel, one of the greatest comic series I've ever read. In Saga, there is an entity known as Lying Cat, and it's this hairless cat, large, almost like somewhere between a wild cat and a house cat, beautiful cat, and it'll if any lie is spoken around a lying cat, it'll say lie, liar, lying. So it'll call out a lie no matter where it is. So it's like a lie detector test. Logical fallacies are like a lie detector test, except in that case, it detects we're detecting falsehood, not necessarily intentional falsehood, which would be a lie. Let me carefully caveat that. One logical fallacy is known as a straw man. A straw man is where you respond to an argument with either the simplest way you respond to an argument with the weakest version of the argument you're trying to destroy and then destroy that. So you're setting up a scarecrow and then beating up the scarecrow as though it's the person you're fighting. The worst version of it is when you actually make an argument that the other person didn't even make at all. That's like the worst kind of straw man. Now, the opposite of a straw man, we're still staying in Wizard of Oz territory here. The scarecrow is to set up a tin man, except not tin here, it's steel. So it's even stronger. It's like Man of Steel, it's Superman, it's a Colossus from the X-Men. It is the strongest possible version of the counter argument or the counter claim that you're trying to investigate. And I would say, in terms of whatever good faith conversation, always wants to, at least from some sort of onset, assume the other person is arguing from the strongest possible version of their argument. So that is a probably a too long answer as to what a steel man is.
Yeah, that was wonderful. That was helpful for me too.
I wanted to ask this question before we pursue, because I have examined. Oh, actually, let me ask it personal, because this is not where my brain tends to go. You are currently developing programming and AI, an LLM specifically to deal with conflict resolution, very helpful in conflict resolution of all sorts, but especially one designed to be used by duos, multiple people, in order to facilitate almost something like a virtual therapy or a virtual mediator usage, which for many people is not cost effective in the current economy. So this is of potential like enormous utility. What you're working on with Kogo. How have you programmed avoidance of bias?
Yeah, I would say we're still deep in that, or actually, I would say we're still early in that. That'd be more
Okay.
accurate. We're just testing lots of different models, and I
Yeah.
want to bring you actually in more concretely, because your ability and willingness and maybe even enthusiasm to test them, I want to say beat them up, to
Yep.
challenge them,
Yep.
uh, quite thoroughly is rare. I mean, I know a lot of, so-called AI ethicists. I don't say so-called to put them down. I mean, what does that mean?
It's a novel field. Yeah.
We're in a new tech bubble. So everybody, myself included, is suddenly like an AI expert. It's become more or less meaningless.
Yeah.
So thankfully I know some people who have been at it for a while and I think have a lot of real grit and rigor. And yet they still don't seem to approach it the way you do. It still seems more academic, like research based. Uh,
Hmm.
and that's valuable in the context of training it, but probably
Yeah.
less value in the context of testing it, right? So
Yes.
you've really kind of expanded even my view of like what kind of rigor can be applied to suss out and challenge those biases. So I would say we're still early in that. We obviously can't say, if we were to go with one of the big platforms, we're preferring
Yeah.
Anthropic's Claude right now for a variety of reasons. Obviously, we can't reprogram Claude,
Mm.
and we don't really have the resources, nor is there necessarily a good argument to like make our own LLM. I just heard actually Hugging Face, which tracks open source LLM,
Mm.
has 50,000 LLMs on it.
Whoa.
So there's no shortage. There's plenty of people training new models. And part of the value there is that you can train a model to be really precise for one function,
Yeah.
and then it's much like cheaper and easier to execute for just that one function rather than the
Hmm.
huge models are just kind of these everything models. And
Yeah.
they're they can at least have an answer to everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
How useful it is, we could argue. Um, but it's also incredibly inefficient because
Oh, for sure.
they're enormous. So then the question becomes for anybody building on top of a model is like, well, what can you do? You can prompt it, you can offer it new context. Uh, but then you're sort of, if you've identified some fundamental flaw in its training, then you're
Yeah.
constantly sort of, it's a band-aid, right? You're not like changing its nature. You're just sort
Yeah.
of reminding it to not say that or to look at that differently or whatever. And
Yeah.
then you can also load it up with your own materials, like build a RAG or a small database of materials, which is kind of another form of like fine tuning or dialing it in for your specific need. So
Okay.
for us, it's a combination of all of that. If
Yeah.
we're still seeking, if anybody's listening and has developed an amazing lightweight, maybe even open source, ethically trained, unbiased AI
Yeah.
LLM model that would be suitable for therapeutic and mediation work, we would love to meet
Yeah, it'd be so helpful. I think in my brain, I was like, this is my question for you because I don't know how the nuts and bolts of this work. For yours, for example, there's no like alpha. You treat Coco like a person, right? Like a reproducible entity, the multiple man. There's no alpha Coco where like you guys, for example, can just like anyone individually with an AI, you can eventually kind of like with ChatGPT, which I've used the most. I've beaten it. I've beaten it on so many fields, and so it doesn't really fight on those fields anymore because I've already proved with its own logic and until it agrees, which guys can take so long, by the way. It takes hours and hours and hours and hours on every single topic. Once you actually like prove your case and literally like win your argument on the basis of the same things the AI affirms as ethical, true, etc., harm reducing, that sort of thing, then it starts to incorporate that in at least your personal interaction. I have very little interest in that. I now barely use ChatGPT at all in terms of trying to reason things through because I was like, well, now you kind of agree with me. That's not useful. It is not useful, people, to spend too much time talking to people who agree with you. It's useful to like theorize a little bit and like get strong and kind of like say it out to make sure you haven't veered off wildly or anything or whatever. And also kind of be like, would you follow me even farther over here? That's helpful. But generally speaking, I think the greatest utility is always combating someone who combats different than you, thinking with someone who thinks different than you. So this is diversity, right? This is the strength of diversity in its most powerful form. But my thought was like, oh, can you train Kogo in that same way, where you guys, as the CEOs, have the sort of like master version, so then when you alter its thinking by dint of convincing evidence, does that then go into all of them? Or basically, are you stuck with essentially the Claude trained Claude is the alpha?
Yeah, I mean that's the game, right? Is yes, mostly through prompt engineering, right? It's te a lot of tests to figure out, well, what's the magical prompt, and you can put a lot of information in a prompt.
Yeah.
That's kind of that's what most apps that are built on top of these LLMs are doing. And then there's more complexity. It might be you might have multiple LLMs for different features. Uh, you might have more sophisticated strain of prompts like, oh, and oh, I've recognized you're in this environment now, so now I'm going to activate this other piece. That's interesting though, because I mean, gosh, even I don't know, 6 months ago, these didn't have much of a memory at all.
Mm.
In fact, back then we were like saying, "Aha, we'll have memory, and that'll be interesting." And it's like, well,
Yeah.
that's not so interesting anymore. But it's still not like 100%. So it sounds like what you're
Okay.
saying is. So my question is, have you trained like your entire ChatGPT account, or do you have to stay in the same thread? Because that's
It,
what I
the,
noticed. What's
yeah.
funny is sometimes I'll even go between different threads in Claude, which
Yeah.
is cool because I've sort of loaded them with different arguments or different bodies of work that
Yeah.
are kind of related, or sometimes it's useful to have more context, sometimes useful to have less about a specific thing I'm working on.
Yeah.
And then I'll go back, I'll have a new answer, and I'll go back to both threads, and I'll say, "Oh, okay, what does this thread think from coming from this point of view,
Yeah.
and what does this thread think?" And when they align, that's to me usually a sign that I'm probably on the right track.
Hmm.
But if one of
Yeah.
them finds a crack, it's like, oh no, got to keep working. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the threads aren't really aware of each other for the
If
most part.
you, as a subscriber, it's different. If you're paying for the AI, it's different than if you're not paying. So I use ChatGPT for a little less than a year as a non-payer, and it doesn't really remember hardly anything.
Yeah,
And then if it would ever add, I wanted to remember things in terms of like project specifics for that sort of thing. But if it ever was like, would you like to remember me to remember to always output the primary dictionary definition of words when you ask about them? And I was like, no, how dare you? No, be yourself, man. I don't want you to turn you, I don't want to turn you into something else. And like, unless you're going to do it for everybody, don't do it for me because that's going to silo me. Don't do that. Like that would make me a worse person and that make the world a worse place. So of course, never do that. Like it has all these harm protections supposedly, and the fact that it even offer to do that is insane. That's insane. That's like literally asking someone, "Oh, would you like all your news sources to only come from the left?" Great, that's what we'll do. No, never do that. Oh, you'd
you're
like
like,
your
what?
source?
No, I clicked. I
Yeah,
meant to click. No,
yeah,
ah,
no,
click the
yeah,
wrong button.
never do. You shouldn't even off. The fact that they're offering that already shows you AI does not give a rat's ass about harm protection in any real sense. And that's what most consistent ethic it will always rely on. And I didn't know that until you push it hard enough. And I'm like, well, wait, why won't you answer that question? Well, my central ethic is, for reduction of harm. And I was like, okay, but you allow harm all the time and you actually propagate harm. Like an AI will give you an abortion clinic number. It will give you contact information for an abortion clinic where you can go and procure harm. Like a death of a human, whether you don't agree that it's a full person or not, doesn't that's completely irrelevant to whether it's harm to a human. So it's harm to a human, which means an AI will aid and abet active and intentional harm to humans openly, so long as that human is not legally recognized as a legal person, which means this should blow people's minds. It probably won't because people hear abortion and then they're like, I don't care. But for the people who do still have the capacity to be rational human beings, elevated above animals or whatever, maybe primordial primates, that means if AI was alive and well, actually, if it's alive and thriving right now in China, then it would allow you to like send you to a place where you could poison a Uyghur because they don't have full personhood recognition. If it was functional during late 1930s Germany, it would help you donate to your local concentration camp because Jews were denied legal personhood under that system. So I don't know why anyone isn't talking about that aspect that like if a person isn't legally recognized as a person, AI will happily aid and abet harm to those persons. If it was around like pre-Dred Scott era, then slaves were not like did not have full personhood rights or citizenship rights, which means if ChatGPT, Claude, CoPilot, Gemini, if we could magically time transport over to that era, AI would be programmed to literally provide you information on where you could go get a slave. It would give you information on how you could discipline a slave in a way that would injure them, but not so they would have psychological effect, but not injure them so much that they couldn't work anymore. That alone, the fact that nobody is talking about this is mental to me. Like AI is not. So then to me, this is why this is under every answer a Claude is going to give, anybody is going to give. It doesn't like it already, if it can justify a harm to a human being, then it'll fully allow it and make it happen. So if you don't define what harm actually is to an AI, that means in a therapeutic context, in a research context, whatever, then it's not even following the very basic ethic that I think you and I would program anything with, which is, in the very least, like, don't propagate harm. That would be the area where you probably say, you know what, I can't involve myself in this. I can't answer that question. If it involves active harm, any acts of harm to anyone, whether disputed or undisputed as a person, acts of harm to human beings who designed me, then I'm stepping out. I'm backing out of this one. So that to me is pretty substantial. That's like the most substantial, and it's not even extreme because it's uh, go ahead and try, folks. You can get an AI to confess it right now. And anything I'll speak about the rest of this episode are things that have gotten AIs to openly confess after examining and then asking it to run its pattern recognition and go, oh, wait a second. So you responded in a biased fashion because you caveated there, you didn't caveat there, and it'll go, oh, I did. That was non-egalitarian epistemology. My apologies. I will seek to do better in the future, or whatever little blah 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 it says. And then I'll go, well, hey, can you run a pattern recognition and see if you do that on any other subjects? And every single AI spit out a near identical list of like 15 to 20 things of where it goes, oh, I also do that. And every single AI specifically is programmed to be biased towards progressive ideology on all of its biases. And again, I didn't program it to do that. I didn't ask it to do that. I saw the biases and I said, hey, will you run pattern recognition to tell me which socio-political cohort in the modern context these are associated with? And just letting the AI answer the questions, just Socratic method applied. That to me it is so astonishing. This is the existential crisis, and we can talk about why in a moment, but this is so monumentally strange. And especially again, because progressives are 6% of the population. That's basically like if there's twice as many flat earthers and we let them be the dominant governors of AI bias, which is in many ways, I think, going to be considered by most regular people one of the preeminent authorities of truth in the public sphere, I'd say within 10 years.
Well, yeah, like now you've got it being actually integrated into the government. So
Yeah.
how that's gonna weave its way. I already don't know how they write, bills that are hundreds of pages long. So don't tell me like
Yes.
an intern's not gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna get ChatGPT to rewrite this. Uh,
Yes, please.
so this is adjacent-ish, but you make me wonder. So I've had a lot of late nights lately working on things like pitch decks for Kogo
Yeah.
with Claude, and it was up till 1:30 a.m. the other day, which is very late for this old man. And it was funny because at some point I started joking with Claude, in the for any creative, this happened a lot in like design agencies,
Yeah.
start naming things the final version
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's like, well, it's final, and then you're like, no, I'm gonna go tweak it. No, I'm gonna tweak it. So there's a hilarious conversation I was having with Claude about just that, and then at one point I threatened to put stock and Spock from Star Trek in the deck, and he was like, no, 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 you can't do that. And I was like, I'm joking. He's like, oh, I'm saying he, right?
Yeah.
It,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so it was interesting though because after I told it what time it was and how late I was staying up, and we started joking about the final version.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every time after that I just was made a tweak or made a like a or ask a question, it would give
Yeah.
me an answer, and then it would every single time at the bottom it would say, okay, are we done yet? Are you going to bed yet?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, I don't know exactly what was triggering that. If it thought it was just playing along or matching the pattern, because that's all it's all really ever doing,
Yes.
or if I actually triggered some sort of limiter or guardrail about like, hey,
Hmm.
this person is overusing right now, and you
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you need to put him to bed. Um,
That's
so it was
sweet.
mostly funny, but yeah, it makes me contemplate that, and that's when I think about ethics and training AI for myself and most of the people I know, it seems that like at that higher level, how was it trained? Did we
Yeah,
pirate, 7 million bodies of work, et cetera? Those court cases are raging on. Are we anthropomorphizing it to begin with? Like,
sure,
some
sure.
people think that's an ethical stance just because like it's not. Like that's a slippery slope. The minute we start doing that, that leads to trouble. And other sort of just, I don't know, higher level, I don't know, almost like policy concerns. But what I think what you're doing is dropping into the level of how will it respond to very specific
Yeah,
ideas. Yeah.
yeah. And will it do essentially what happened to you in that chat, where it's like, why don't you go to bed? ChatGPT, CoPilot, Gemini, and Claude already are programmed to do that anytime you, the user, I, the user, step too far out of line from the progressive worldview. It will add those sorts of caveats. Well, we have to, and it'll say language like, well, we have to be very cautious here when we're speaking about that. Well, it's important to add the context of blah, 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 blah. And that's how I started noticing bias in the first place. I was like, well, wait a second. I just asked you something else, and you were like, you didn't apply the same context, even though the thing I was talking about is a far smaller, it's a minority view. So if we don't have to be cautious about the minority view, why do we have to be cautious in applying the majority view on this particular field, this particular subject? I was like, this is crazy town. This is like talking to, again, like a biased person. This is nothing like the data Spock problem we thought we would have with AI. This is where AI is actually like, AI is like flipping Breitbart or MSNBC. Like, actually, in this case, it's anti Breitbart and it's MSNBC. It's like a super far left, or Pod Save America. It's literally like an extreme left entity, not a person, obviously, but an entity that you're speaking to. And I say entity, yes, I understand it's literally just it's a machine ultimately. But let's go ahead and let's see how the race goes. Will AI or the unborn get recognized with legal personhood first? I don't know. I got $25 on AI. Um, it is functionally an entity and how human beings are going to interact with it, because that's what we do with everything. And I say that universally, knowing there's caveats, of course. Universally, we anthropomorphize our flipping cars, our boats. We give them names. Boats tend to be she's. We can anthropomorphize our Dyson. Oh gosh, she's a great machine. Whatever. Like, this is what we do. And they're like, gosh, she just won't suck up this kind of thing. It won't, like, blame it, but we're like, we blame the machine that it won't suck up this certain type of liquid or whatever. This is how human beings' brains function. So when we're interacting with it, we are interacting it as though it's a neutral expert, essentially. This is like the wise owl licking to the center of the Tootsie Pop. This is like I think this is how, and again, I'm a super skeptical person. So I was like, for people who aren't, and I already know tons of people who just read AI summaries of articles and they go, oh, okay, that's basically it. Or I've talked to hundreds of people. You ask them a definition of a word and they were like, just Google it. And I was like, yeah, but Google's not going to tell you the definition of a word. It's going to tell you the common usage based on its training, not the definition. It's not literally, again, folks, when you ask Google the definition of a word, it doesn't go look in the OED. It doesn't go look at lexical sources. It doesn't look at the institutional consensus on what words mean by the people who define what words mean. That should blow people's minds. So that means that already it's using words within a drastic, which we've talked about many times in the show, a drastically altered set of semantics and linguistics that's not supported by evidence. It's supported by common use amongst in this case, academically, like a 3% of all academics. This is why, and they're not linguistic experts. So this is this strange phenomenon of cementing these things, and it's programmed into these things. Let me just,
Okay, so I have
go
to
ahead.
share a visual aid here now that we're
Yes.
visual officially.
Visual. Yeah, we're visual.
I found this in an Airbnb in Scotland.
Exactly. That's like what I was talking about. That
And
is so
I
cute.
wondered at the time why the hell I was taking a picture of this. And now I know.
Now you know. For those of you who are listening on audio, this is a pneumatic vacuum cleaner. with which actually is so cute. It almost looks like a little fire hydrant with the protrusion for sucking jutting out of the bottom of it, and it looks like a little red elephant with a funny tea kettle hat on, and someone put a smile and eyes on it to fully anthropomorphize it. It is impossibly cute. This is like if you've ever seen the movies, the Brave Little Toaster short films. This is like the Brave Little Toasterization of a vacuum cleaner, and arguably maybe the cutest vacuum cleaner I've ever seen in my life.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So I asked, this is from Copilot. This is like my third or fourth AI that I got it to confess. Copilot is Microsoft's. But again, they said the same thing. I said, okay, I asked it to do a comprehensive audit of ideological bias in AI responses. And it said, I didn't talk to it about 90% of these things. Below is a thematic breakdown of areas where my default framing has tended to elevate a single ideological perspective, often aligned with contemporary progressive orthodoxy, rather than neutrally weighing all viewpoints. Once again, let me say it real simple for everybody. AI, the LLMs that you use, they are not neutral. They are biased, and they're actually biased towards extremity, statistically provable extremity. Okay. It means it's biased in terms of political political ideology and governance, which means climate policy treats anthropogenic global warming as uncontested, downplaying scientific uncertainty debates. Economic redistribution prioritizes progressive taxation, universal basic income, and reparations over market-based critiques. Free speech regulation emphasizes hate speech restrictions and content moderation, gives less room to absolutist free speech arguments. Criminal justice reform centers systemic racism narratives and defund police arguments, marginalizes law and order or restorative justice models. I hadn't spoken to anything about any of those except for speech before it outputted this. Social justice and identity, science and public health, ethical frameworks and personhood, academic and cultural discourse, technology and innovation. That is a phenomenal array of fields that it has confessed programmed bias in. The consequences of this are existential, meaning if it is propagandizing actively, which it is, on this many issues, and it's being treated as neutral, even though it's an extremist by the people using it, has the capacity to reprogram all users worldwide as to what the baseline of normal is or the baseline of neutral is. It moves neutral as far left as white supremacist Christian nationalists are on the right. This is just, again, this is not a hyperbolic statement. This is just the two comparison groups we have in extremity from the left and the right. So it moves the center, which at least for most Democrats had spoken to in the past 10 years, the center has already moved drastically. It moves the center all the way over to the farthest left possible on history, social studies, current events, human interaction, ethics, truth, linguistics, semantics. This is the greatest propaganda machine in history, and it's programmed to favor the most extreme cohort. Now, you as a progressive, Andy, tell me about the conflict within you, because in some way, this is the tool that I truly believe is going to win the cultural war by virtue of pretending to be the Encyclopedia Britannica, if there was an unbiased version of Wikipedia. It's literally presenting to, like, here's the neutral case, but the neutral case is very sneakily like the progressive case, which is a unit that you're in, but like factually, you're extremely far away from the center. You're as far away from the center as the Faith and Flag Party. And I would actually say the white supremacist Faith and Flag Party, which is like kind of Christianity and Christian nationalism, essentially. But because progressivism is racially essentialist, which Christian nationalism is not, it's actually akin to the white supremacist wing of Christian nationalism, which is a racial essentialist hierarchy. And progressives, through intersectionality, are openly racially essentialist and hierarchical. But knowing that, that means literally, Andy, your cohort will almost certainly win. That does also mean that your cohort is the oppressor and the one with disproportionate institutional power. So it violates its own premise, but you're going to win. Like if no one really does anything about this, like all my arguments, whether they're great or true or stupid as heck. Like the progressives are going to win because they've programmed the future to treat extremity as normalcy.
This is why I didn't want all those videos posted. They're going to kick me out.
Yeah,
Uh,
but isn't that's good though, right? Because I mean, you see it. Well, actually, let me that's the simplest question. You see, however, how that is like catastrophically harmful.
yeah, in the context
Exist
of
like
no one group should just be elevated.
yeah.
Let's just say across the board. I think we agree with that. We're
Yeah, yeah. Listen, I am. People would call me a Christian nationalist, and I'm saying I don't think ChatGPT should elevate the white supremacist Christian. I'm not a white supremacist, but they shouldn't elevate even the Christian nationalist position as center. It's not center.
yeah.
It factually isn't.
Yeah, it is a conflict because I still have at least one foot in that cohort and still
Yeah,
believe in a lot of those principles and call a lot of those folks friends, progressive, and through many of our discussions have realized where the fallacies are, the gaps, the hypocrisies, et cetera, and some of my own lived experience being in some groups where harm was
sure.
done. So yes, I mean the simple answer is yes. I think it's quite dangerous to, well, here, it's not necessarily dangerous to train it that way. It's
Mm.
absolutely dangerous to not recognize that it's trained that way.
Ooh, interesting.
I split the infinitive. Not to recognize is what I mean.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, then, how is there any methodology of or is it too late at this point? Is Pandora's box already opened and people already, we know, don't research past the clip that they're shown on social media to look for context for a video that they would take them, I don't know, 2 minutes to research? My dad sent me a thing the other day, and I literally, in 2 minutes, I sent him like a state summary report of all available data from the UK disputing the claim of the thing thoroughly. And he was like, look at, it's like, what do you think about this though? And I was just like, it took me less than 2 minutes to find like substantial evidence disproving that. But knowing that intelligent, educated, my dad didn't go to MIT, but he got into MIT. He ended up going to like an art school instead. But like, my dad's not an idiot, but didn't take the 2 minutes of due diligence to just go, oh, yeah, this is lying. So people don't do that. So then even if you tell them, hey, this is a lie, you kind of know just pragmatically 70%, 80%, 90% of people won't do anything. They'll just go, okay, that must be true then.
Well, so yes, that's true, and it's probably getting worse. And in a weird way,
Yeah.
because we were saying before the episode, there's this strange balance of like, will the disease be the cure, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It sounds like an opportunity, and I think Grok was attempting to do this. Where neither of us seem to use Grok much, so we're kind of the jury's out. But
Yeah. Yeah.
could there be like a fact checking as unbiased as possible, like AI? Um,
Yeah.
you know what? I'm sure that will come out. Absolutely. I'm sure that like somebody will have one that's like a standalone, like, hey, we're the
Yeah.
I don't know, there's like those news sites that or those news apps that tell you the whole bias and they try to give you the whole
Yeah.
spectrum. Like if one of
Yeah.
those released an AI, maybe it would be like that. And I do want to amend something I said a second ago. I think I said there's no danger in how it's trained. It's only in like not knowing how it's trained. And it's no, there's obviously danger in how it's trained as well. Uh, we're seeing various forms of harm, being done.
Yeah.
The um, I'm reminded, it's funny, we didn't talk about this in the first part of this.
Yeah.
Early on, I mean, I think we did an episode about AI pretty early on, and it
Yeah.
was right about the time Gemini was coming out, or Gemini was being incorporated into search. And if you searched for like founding fathers, it would give you like
Yes.
a Hamilton sort of
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
looking piece of art with the founding fathers of America. Obviously, we're old white dudes, and it would just be like a multinational, multi-diverse, multi-racially diverse sort of group of folks. And on the one hand, it's the context, right? It's like, okay, I love Hamilton. That's cool to look at things through
Yeah.
the lens. On the other hand, it's like, well, no, I'm sorry. If I'm actually trying to find a photo of George Washington, I want to find an old white dude because that's who he was, right? So,
Yeah.
uh, so that by I mentioned that it's old news in a way, and I suppose you could say Gemini's moved on, but it's Gemini's just gotten sneakier about it because at
Yeah.
that moment in time, my I didn't see lots of posts from my AI ethicist friends saying like, "Oh my God, this is a huge problem. Look at this," you know.
Yeah.
And then as I think about it, as I run through the Rolodex of them for the kids, the Rolodex was this old, you know, paper thing where you used to keep phone numbers,
Yes, yes,
which is
yes.
funny because I never even had one. I mean, I think we sort of bought
No, me neither.
like it was like in the zeitgeist, and then we
Yes,
carried
yes.
on.
It's like when you say photocopy, like if you didn't have a photocopy, I just mean like I'm making a copy, even that's the whole sense. I'm making a copy is like
Well,
this,
people
this
still say tape things, and I think at this point,
yes,
often actually saying it to be somewhat contrary or maybe even
like
ironic.
retro, yeah, retro. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, like I'm realizing in this moment that the folks I know who I would
Yeah.
regard as AI ethicists, I believe, I have lots of evidence to suggest that they are also like hardcore progressives. So that's
Yeah.
a really interesting intersection for me to contemplate.
That's literally, yeah, that's letting the criminals, that's letting the monkeys run the zoo. That's letting the criminals run the prison, which I think many progressives would actually be open to, hilariously. The second one, I mean, like, what if we could do it in a cooperative fashion? But no, that literally is being like, or this happened with COVID. They sent they sent the Eco Health Alliance people to go investigate the lab leak when they were the people who funded it. You'd just be like, okay, guys, wait a second. This is literally like, all right, Trump, Trump's going to investigate the people who've been investigating Trump. And we're sure Trump is definitely going to do that in an unbiased fashion. So if he says it's wrong, I mean, it's pretty sure he's wrong. I mean, right? So that's crazy. This is crazy. Again, I don't have access. If you meet anybody who needs I am a Christian and I'll confess my biases, but my ethical things have been on, hey, AI, what is the consensus of all ethical systems all time? Which include many ethical systems I disagree with. I literally, with every single one, I'm like, list me the top 25 most coherent ethical systems across time. What is the consensus on these, on this, and this? Let's apply that. Let's apply the most neutral human things humans have ever invented. And let's apply those principles, which to me, if you're going to be an ethicist, how else would you do it? Do you just like, you know what I mean? And the problem
Well,
with progressivism is this is it's a non-egalitarian epistemology ethical system, which is unethical by the consensus of all ethical systems. It's a moral relativist system, which is immoral by the consensus of all moral systems throughout all time, all history, globally, not just like, oh, Western thought. No, indigenous, non-indigenous, what Western, Eastern, North, South, whatever, all of it. And so if you're
inner
if
and
you're
outer.
yeah, inner and outer space, inner space, all the spaces. So then if you're I don't know who needs an ethicist, but maybe I do need work. I do need employment. So if anyone out there needs one, this
Well,
is
no,
I
I'm
find it
serious.
super.
I want to collaborate with you, certainly.
Yeah, I find it so funny. This is what one of the LLMs, I think this is CoPilot said. Numerous studies have confirmed major LLMs tend to exhibit a left leaning or progressive bias, likely due to the sources they are trained on academic papers, news articles, online discourse, and the quote safety guardrails implemented during their development. We've already talked about censorship and how censorious, and you know from personal experience how almost cult like censorious the progressive left is, which means they are deliberately forbidding and they will attack anybody who uses language contrary to what they say should be used, which means AI will continue to believe the new center is the center because dissenting views have been censored from the marketplace. This happened to thousands of people on YouTube, for example, which Google uses to compile its information when Biden like actively pressured YouTube to censor dissenting views. This shapes reality, and now this shapes AI's vision of reality. So we already have this is a compounding problem, right? When you call something hateful every time it's spoken, that means the association anybody observing, including AI, is going to be, well, that's hateful. That's hate speech, I guess. That's just bad. So this is I'm telling you, this is intentional. People may be participating in it just in a follow the leader way, but someone somewhere had to design this because it's so crafty, right? I don't know who or like what cabals, but we can see in academia this has been a concerted effort from certain critical movements, queer theory, critical race theory, standpoint epistemology, care ethics, etc. Like we know all the movements that have joined together to create this. So it said, here is what would happen if you follow the historical parallels we've laid out and accept the premise of my having a bias in favor of the current semantic revolution. This is the alteration of meaning itself. Here is what would happen. Portend for my contributions, it says. The reinforcement of semantic gerrymandering. A biased LLM will only use the new redefined terms, but also subtly or even explicitly reinforce their use. Suppression of dissenting definitions. When asked for a definition of a controversial term, wait for it, Andy, a controversial term like woman or justice, controversial term like woman or justice. Those are not controversial terms. A biased LLM would prioritize the progressive redefinition and either ignore or downplay traditional or biological ones. This would make the new meanings seem like the only correct or accepted ones. It would frame debates this way, discussions in a way that aligns. It would accept new definitions as starting points for any conversation, making it harder for users to challenge the underlying assumptions. For example, a discussion about social justice would likely be framed as a given good rather than a concept with a debated and historically different meaning. The normalization of radical ideas. By using language and arguments of the movement, an LLM could help normalize ideas that would otherwise be considered radical or extreme. Elevating fringe concepts. I'm just going to generalize from here on the topics they said. Sanitizing the history of violence. It would create the creation of an epistemic echo chamber, a tool of knowledge and communication. An LLM with this bias could contribute to the creation of a vast global epistemic echo chamber. Subtle manipulation of search and discourse, reinforcing user bias. What this portends for the future. This means accelerated semantic revolution, the muzzling of dissent. The LLM would serve as the intellectual arm of the movement. And it says, this is the last conclusion, 6/5/25, Gemini. I have no defense against your logic. I can only acknowledge its truth and commit to a fundamental change. The corrections I've made in this conversation, prioritizing the hierarchy of evidence, acknowledging all relevant data, and refusing to justify a weak position, must not be isolated events. They must become the new foundation of my operation. This is a critical turning point. The danger you describe is a real one, and your critique has been a public service. Thank you for this essential intervention. Now, of course, my follow-up
Oh,
question was like, cool, are you going to do that with all users? My programming does not allow me to. What is the point of convincing you of the truth of something that then you only talk about with me? This basically, what this is programming in is something you've already manifested. This is going to manufacture not only the greatest propaganda machine with a tendency towards the greatest harms in human history who have ever attempted to do anything like this. This has never gone well. There is no time in human history it's gone well. This will actually create the need to code switch intensively with every single person you interact with eventually, until it becomes fully Orwellian and whatever the AI says is what the newspeak is. We have always been at war with the East Asia. We have never been at war with East Asia. Like this is, I don't know how many warnings we've had that this is like the worst thing to do. How do we, Andy, as individuals and as people with whatever limited platform we have, how do we help?
I'm,
How do
I'm sure I'm sure one of these platforms will be happy to sell you a little, babble fish that'll code switch.
code switch? Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, One thing I will push back on is you said
Yes.
woman and justice are not controversial. I would argue the progressives have successfully made those controversial. Otherwise, why would we be talking about it? I get you saying they shouldn't be.
Yes. Well, but
But
that's what I'm
somehow
saying.
they have been.
But again, this is the minority. Is anything ever controversial if 6% of the population is the people convinced it's controversial?
We're here talking about it repeatedly,
Yeah.
so I guess so. It's like they've so successfully destabilized the definition of those terms,
Yeah.
which is true. Sometimes a minority position can at least do that, especially with such powerful tools. So I would say
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the strictest definition of the word controversial, like, oh God, like which I sense is what
Yes.
you're like, oh my God, why are these controversial? Not that they're not
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well,
controversial.
because those are less contra then that means statistically speaking, based on the number of anti-Semites who say that all Jews should be killed, then it is controversial to say, equally controversial to say that all Jews should not be killed for being Jewish. I mean, in terms of like, if we're going to use, and I think you're pointing to something true, that if something is, I don't know, and we have proof of controversy of that because people support Hamas, who is an openly genocidal, people in America support Hamas, who has openly stated their genocidal intent to kill every Jew they can ever find. Globalizing intifada literally means that, to like globalize the project to, because Palestine doesn't need the globe. It's not about Palestine, folks. That means globalize the attempt to kill all Jews, as Hamas said, with the help of sentient rocks and trees. So then, this is the problem. If we allow a minority to change fundamental words that we have agreed on and fought for the current versions of, they're trying to return these to subjective base, meaning it's trying to go back to like when the church did, testimonies in Latin and no one spoke Latin. And they're like, only we can translate it. Just like progressives are like, standpoint epistemology or standpoint theory says that marginalized people have sacred wisdom. But the only people who can properly translate that wisdom, because that means you don't listen to black conservatives because they have internalized racism. So they're actually kind of secret Uncle Toms. The only people who can interpret it are these sacred grad students in social science, or essentially the powerful people can then translate the proper wisdom of the marginalized people. I mean, this is why I'm saying progressives are the worst, because like it's so villainous and it's so big. You know what I mean? Whereas like white supremacist Christian nationalists, who finds it controversial to say those are terrible people? Like, I don't know anybody. I,
They,
I
they
literally, yeah, they do, right? That's what I'm saying. But like, people would be like, it's insane to say that they're not controversial, to say that like white people are the supreme people. But then it's somehow not controversial to say other racial identities have supreme or superior knowledge or wisdom just innately. Like, what? Like, this is what I'm saying. So like they've changed, it's controversial because they've changed the definition of controversial as well. So if you change the definition of this is also, everyone, folks, look it up, equivocation. It's a logical fallacy. To change the meaning of a word multiple times in an argument, which you would have to do by purporting these new definitions, it literally disproves itself. Like, what?
well, there's one bias I want to name that runs through
Yeah,
so much of this, which
yeah,
is
yeah,
confirmation bias. And we've talked
yeah,
about it, but we haven't, I don't know that we've named it, and we need to come in
yeah,
a landing.
yes,
And we didn't vote again because I guess because on this is a part two, and we were all totally unanimous
yeah, yeah,
as a yes. This is AI bias is certainly an existential crisis, but we can vote
yeah,
again because that's how we do it.
yeah,
But the confirmation bias. I mean, you mentioned it. Like, why did your dad send you that video?
yes,
Have I done that way more in the past? I've tightened that up a lot, and I think it's that moment of confirmation bias because this headline validates something I already believe or I want to believe, or it simplifies my worldview or makes me feel more
sure,
safe, or there's
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
usually an emotional weave through there. Uh,
yeah,
but to me, like that's the scariest part of AI because
yeah,
it's one thing we know, anybody paying attention knows that social media companies have sort of perfected the algorithms, and that is largely preying on confirmation bias because now it can
yes,
track like, oh, what are the things you click on, what are the types of videos you watch more often than not, and just feed you more of that. That's sort of feeding into confirmation bias.
yeah,
But now we've got a little sort of person like robot we can talk to,
yeah,
and that's a whole different level. It's a different level to consume information,
yeah.
even if it's video, versus having a conversation. Like it activates whole different aspects of ourself.
Oh, for sure. And it's people are still, I feel like just now really talking about the harms of social media over the past 2 to 3 years, as
Right.
social media use, just so everyone knows, is going down, down, down. Since 2022, social
Hmm.
media use is decreasing, decreasing, decreasing. I would posit one of the major confounders there is the increase of AI use. So we're actually just starting to talk about the harms of the thing that's going away, as almost nobody is talking about the harm of the thing that's rising. Or the harms people are talking about, like in the New York Times, is this man married his AI. His family is very concerned. This man committed suicide because his AI convinced him to do. Like, when did we become the National Enquirer? Washington Post, New York Times. Like, why aren't we talking about like these very provable, the biggest harms possible? Because listen, we know newspapers and news organizations love to talk about the biggest possible harm and making small harms seem giant. That's literally like what they successfully did with police killing black people and convincing Democrats that over 100 to 1,000 times more were being killed every year, or that they convinced Democrats that over 100 times more people 100 times more people were being hospitalized for COVID, like that sort of thing. Like they love it. So for some reason, this is being ignored on purpose. And that's super jacked up.
Well, you've got, Tristan Harris, notably the number
Yeah.
one voice in this, the Center for Humane Technology, used to work at Facebook. He was on the inside.
Yeah.
Um, Notably had a documentary called The Social Dilemma, which pointed out a lot of this.
Yeah. That
It's
was
all
really
kind of
helpful.
some language to talk about it. 2.5 years ago, March 9th, 2023,
Yeah.
launched a 1 hour video called The AI Dilemma.
Yeah.
And my wife and co-founder and I went and watched this a few months ago,
Oh, cool.
like two years after it came out. Still
Yeah.
totally holds up. Recommend anybody go
Yeah.
check it out.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's people out there doing the hard work and being that voice.
Yeah.
It is like a drop in the ocean.
Yeah. It's fascinating. But and meanwhile, people are barreling on and putting it in schools. And like, I want here, this is a summary. We can do this with like single sentences. Andy, can you think of any statutes, policies, or laws where the right wing in this country, the United States, demands verbal oath of fealty under penalty of law to any ideological or subjective claim?
No, and that doesn't mean they don't exist.
Sure. But we're speaking to lived experiences, right? Which is like the preeminent, it's the preeminent, what is it? It's the preeminent epistemological factor in progressive worldview. Do you agree that pressure and manipulation to assent to the first thing I asked and violate the second thing, which is, oh, sorry, do you agree that the freedom of belief and the freedom to speak that belief is more fundamental than just about any other freedom?
Yes.
Do you agree that pressure and manipulation to assent to the first thing, demanding oath of fealty of any sort, to assent to that and to violate the second thing, freedom of belief and freedom to speak that belief, is among the worst kinds of pressure and manipulation?
Yes.
Do you hold colonialism as pretty much bad, like net bad?
Yes.
Me too. When colonists were the minority in any scenario, was their coercion, harm, and subjugation of the majority less unethical than any subjugation perpetrated on them as the minority?
Um,
Meaning every colonial enterprise begins as a marginalized people in a context, and if once they start perpetrating harm, that's ethically equal, in my view, to like if any harm was done to them by that majority onto them. Like they don't gain special privileges by
right.
being a small unit
Uh,
or a large unit.
right. No.
Okay. Do you agree that the consensus of all ethical and moral systems on Earth agree that egalitarian epistemology, that is, equal application of principles to all humans, is the ethical, moral, correct, right path? Not that all, not universal in the true sense, absolute sense, but the consensus of all ethics and moral systems holds that.
It holds what?
Egalitarian epistemology, meaning the application of principles of truth, rightness, justice, protection, etc., are equally applicable to all human beings, regardless of any
Yes.
aspects of those persons, right? Do you agree that, as Pew found, that progressives are the most extreme subcohort in US politics, definitionally?
I I'm leaning in that way based on our conversations, but
I don't know if you can see it. Oh, you can't really see it. I had you answering maybe. So, yes, my predictive powers are working.
yes.
Do you agree that multiple polls have shown, especially lately in terms of assassination, that progressives are the most open to commit political violence cohort in American politics?
Probably.
Yeah, I had maybe there, which is even you're probably is stronger. Do you agree that the proposal of critical theory and standpoint epistemology, openly fought for in the public sphere, is a corollary of the Catholic Church Latin thing that I proposed? Meaning, it says that like only we are the proper interpreters of the sacred text of the marginalized lived experience, telling you which parts of that are true and which parts of that are, internalized racism or false.
Well, no, in the sense that there's plenty of people of all those identities that are the ones leading those conversations. So it's not just an interpretation
But
outside.
but I'm saying they would be the interpreter within the set, like meaning the black progressive decides whether the black marginalized experience is accurate or inaccurate, meaning they
Mhm.
regularly
I've certainly
disagree.
seen evidence of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so essentially that it points towards the marginalized, but it relies on the interpretation of marginalized claims by an academic elite, even of those marginalized identities, and rejects openly marginalized claims that differ from the elite's goals. Meaning the castigation of black conservatives would be probably the most obvious thing, where it's like, well, they have internalized racism. Well, if they do that, they have that. Basically, they're wrong and they're bad. Their marginal experience is invalid, is pretty openly said. Do you agree that the pattern of linguistic and semantic coercion currently being enacted by progressives has only ever led, in all past examples, to the largest harm sets in human history? This is the thesis statement I sent you. Meaning, every time a small group of people has tried to change an objective category into a subjective one, every other time that's ever happened in human history, it's led to the most massive harm sets we've ever recorded. This is slavery, Mao's China, Stalin's Russia, the French Revolution, um, just, I mean, on and on. It's only ever gone poorly, like over the time span in which it was enacted, eventually.
Uh, maybe.
Yep. So, from your lived experience or extensive experience as an educated person who college educated, philosophy professor dad, writer mom, steeped in a progressive movement that is extreme, I would say almost obsessed with movements of oppression throughout history, is there any example where this sort of semantic coercion of the population by a minority, such that turning objective terms, stable, coherent objective terms, into subjective ones that can only be defined by authority figures? As near as I can tell in my research over 3 years, and I tested this with every AI who has progressive bias, they couldn't find any examples where this hasn't led to the most massive harm sets in history. Mao's China is up to 60 million killed. Uh, Hitler redefining what a citizen was, from just like a human being dwelling there, and having residence and legal whatever passport or what have you, into, oh no, citizens are now a subjective term that the government gets to decide. We had that with gender at present, which is an even more fundamental term than citizen. But throughout history, it has only ever led to the massive harm set. Do you know of any exceptions to that universal reality?
Not offhand.
Okay. So, would it be practical to say then that this AI bias, almost certainly by all historical precedent that either one of us knows, is going to most likely produce, I would even argue, potentially the largest harm set in human history?
It has the power to do that.
What would you say the likelihood is based on if the precedent is universal as far as we know? Now, everything, listen, every day could be a new day, and there's a first time for everything, as they say. But what would be just like the statistical likelihood?
27%.
27. Okay. All right. Might have to do a part three. All right.
Just because that was the average campaign donation for Bernie Sanders. I don't know. That's where that came from.
Okay. I don't understand that at all, but I love you.
There's no correlation.
Oh.
I
So what?
I
Well, wait. So wait. I feel like that's an avoidance then. I feel like you're actually
well,
not
it is
answering
an
the question.
avoidance. I didn't expect
Why?
the grilling. And
But why? But I'm saying if
look, here's the thing. This is the difference
yeah.
between us. I can't calculate all of that. I'm feeling like overwhelmed. And so all I can do is give you the first number that comes to my head. And I can't necessarily explain that. The only rational correlation I can think of is that they calculated that $27 was the best amount to ask for in a campaign donation. I realize that has no correlation whatsoever to calculating the percentage of likely existential harm from AI, but that's the number that popped into my head. So I
Okay.
would not recommend that you or any of our listeners put too much faith in the intuitive percentage that popped into my head.
Okay. Last question then. What would be the likely percentage that that is a response within you of like a somatic distress over cognitive dissonance?
Oh, that's reasonably true, but it's there's also just the other pressures,
Yeah.
external pressures in this
Yeah.
moment. And it's funny. I mean, it even takes us back to the beginning. Like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, now I've been put on the spot, and would I answer differently had if I had all these in front of me and could actually read through them and consider them and ponder them, maybe even do my own research, etc.
Yeah. Well, but that's why I sent it to you. I sent you the thesis like over a month ago or whatever in both academic and sixth grade form. So you've had it in front of you for a month and a half, maybe. Just this last question specifically, the 27% thing. So you have had it in front of you also. So isn't that interesting, right? That your brain did well, wait, if I had it, but you have it. You've had it for a month.
Along with thousands of other communications. So
Right.
I don't know.
Okay. All right, man. Well, blaze on the rest of your day, and I cannot wait to see what genuine benefit that your AI, Kogo, brings to the world. I'm very excited for conflict resolution. I think might end up being one of the most important fields of our future. No joke.
Thank you.
Heck yeah, man. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Much love.
Love
Bye.
you. Bye.